Welcome, Mike Brickner, Executive Director of ACLU Delaware. A pleasure to see you again. How are you?
I'm doing well, Sharon. I'm really excited to be here with you again today and talking about a really important issue, COVID-19 in our prisons.
Absolutely. We're all sort of self-focused during this and concerned about our own families and friends and access to vaccination. But there are a large number of people in our state who are incarcerated in various facilities, detention centers, prisons, jails, and they're all very vulnerable. So thank you for coming on today. And why don't we begin by having you fill us in? Are there statistics you can offer? How many people are incarcerated approximately, and how many infections have we seen?
Sure. So we have a little over 6,000 folks who are incarcerated in Delaware state prisons. And since the pandemic started last year, between people who both live and also then work in Delaware correctional facilities, we've had about 2,700 cases of COVID-19. 13 of those individuals who are incarcerated then also passed away. So we actually have one of the higher rates of fatalities from COVID-19 nationally. And I think it just illustrates that as much of a crisis as COVID-19 presented to us across the United States, when we look at our incarceration facilities, it was an even worse crisis because, of course, those are congregate facilities where it's hard to socially distance, it's hard to get access to all of the protective equipment that people needed right away. And also you're dealing with a population that oftentimes has a lot of those comorbidity issues where they may have, diabetes or heart disease or have past drug or alcohol use that just make them more susceptible to the virus and lead to higher rates of infection and unfortunately then higher rates of death and very significant injury from the virus.
If I understand what you just said, 6,000 incarcerated, 2,700 infected, that's almost half of the people in these facilities who have contracted COVID. What about the age range?
So the age range varies pretty dramatically within the prison system. We have seen over the past few years that the population within the Delaware Department of Corrections has actually started to gray quite a bit. And that's due to, longer term sentencing issues where we're actually sentencing folks to some longer terms than what we may have in past years. And so we've actually seen where where the population has begun to get a little bit older. And so that's another risk factor for the individuals who became very sick from COVID-19. If you look at the 13 folks who passed away, many of them were not there for short sentences. They were people who were there for sometimes a few years or longer, may have been there for more serious offenses, but had had long-term health issues that help to contribute to them being so susceptible to COVID.
And, a large percentage are nonviolent, and there's so much to talk about here. But what is the vaccination protocol in our prison system in Delaware? Is it like it is on the outside, elderly first?
Yes, so there is some prioritization among the Delaware incarcerated population. But one thing that we should be, I think, proud of that the state of Delaware did is that they did prioritize incarcerated populations overall. There are some states that actually left their incarcerated populations to be much further down the priority list to only open up maybe when it opened up for all adults over 18. So Delaware actually prioritized people who were incarcerated so that they were able to get the vaccination earlier, similar in time frame to a lot of other people who are sort of on the front lines and more likely to be exposed to COVID-19.
Sure.
And I think that's a really important thing because, again, in these congregate care settings where, prisoners really cannot socially distance and the chance of catching COVID-19 are so high, getting the vaccine to them quickly is an important thing. We're still in the process of getting the vaccination out. The last data that I have from the Department of Corrections was from March 30th, and they had about 650 or so people who had received the vaccine at that point, and they were just opening it up to more adults. They had been focusing specifically on more elderly prisoners, and so they then opened it up. So that was the last data that we had. So we still have quite a bit of to go to get full vaccination.
Mike, regardless of what sent them to their current situation, we're talking about people's sons and daughters and brothers and spouses. These are human beings with families who are very worried about them. What rights do people have when they are incarcerated to demand, if you will, medical treatment?
That's such a great question. And I think that when the public sometimes thinks of people who are sent to prison, they say, well, they've lost all of their rights. And that is not true. And I would also say that beyond the rights that incarcerated people have, we as a society also take on then a responsibility to them. That when we take away their liberty, when we take away their freedom to live their lives out in the community because they have been found guilty of a crime, we take on the responsibility of taking care of them, to ensuring that they are treated with dignity, with humanity, and that we are safeguarding their lives and their safety. And so, not just in the world of COVID-19, but when we talk about any type of communicable disease, whether it's tuberculosis or hepatitis or HIV, the prison system takes on a responsibility to treat those individuals, to stem the tide of transmission of those types of diseases, and to also help to take care of the individual because, one of the main goals of our correction system, it should really not just be about punishing people, but it should be about rehabilitating them and restoring them so that when they come out, because the fact of the matter is that the vast majority of people in our state prison system will come back out into the community someday, that they are better than when they went in, and that
wouldn't that be nice?
Rehabilitate. Exactly, right? And that should be one of the key focuses. And so part of that is looking at the prison facilities as part of our community. And if we want to respond to a public health crisis like COVID-19, we have to also prioritize the health care of those individuals incarcerated there.
Well, that would be nice, but in the atmosphere of the last 4 years where, we're polarized and it's accusatory, and I think there's little sympathy among the general public for that, unless it be for the workers. Now, we haven't really, you touched on it, but talk about the people working in penal institutions in Delaware and everywhere. We're putting them at risk too, yeah?
That's absolutely right. That, when you look at a disease like COVID-19 that is transmitted by air, it can go anywhere. And so when you have corrections officers or food service workers or educators who are going in and out of the prison facility, they can catch COVID-19 just as easily as anybody who is incarcerated there. And so when we're looking at their safety too, prioritizing social distancing, getting people the proper medical equipment, ensuring that they're vaccinated also helps to take care of those people who live there. But then also keep in mind that, or the people who work there, but then also keep in mind that those people who work there, they don't just go to that facility and then go home and never talk or speak to anybody. They also go out into the community. And so when you're talking about if they are exposed in the prison facility, they might go to the bank or to a restaurant or to their place of worship or to their neighbor's house and might expose other people in the community. And so again, it's about looking at prisons not just as these kind of separate, isolated places, but they are a part of our community. And so protecting public health in those institutions protects all of our health and all of our safety.
Well, as you say, too, there's no opportunity for other public health initiatives like social distancing. So I am glad to hear that Delaware is doing a good job with vaccination, and that's hopeful anyway.
One other thing that I think is important, and I'm glad you mentioned the family and friends of incarcerated people. One other, I think, important initiative that we've been lauding has been House Bill 37, which was introduced by Representative Melissa Minor Brown. And that would actually provide a public health credit to people who served during a public health emergency in a state prison, and could get them out of incarceration earlier, which would affect folks who are going to be released within the next year, so people who were at the end of their sentence anyway. But what it really does is it helps to make up for the loss of good time that a lot of people had, the ability to do a lot of the rehabilitative work, where oftentimes in prisons you have the ability to take part in programming or other types of educational settings that will help to earn time off of your release. And because of the pandemic, many of those programs were either stopped or curtailed. And so it would provide them that additional public health credit, one, so that we can help to depopulate the prisons, because the fewer people we have in those facilities, the easier it is to socially distance, the easier it is to invest what are pretty scarce resources on the state side into those people who are most vulnerable, if we have fewer people in the system to provide medical assistance to. And then it also helps for people who, again, we're going to get out anyway, to be able to get back to their home, get back and rehabilitate and get back into the job market and become productive members of society.
I tell you, that caucus is having a really positive impact, I think, on our legislature. We can add a link and an explanation to the bill as well. Mike, thank you so much for the work you do and for keeping us informed about that work. There's so much more to talk about. I hope our next conversation maybe can be about voting restrictions. So.
Absolutely. Always happy to talk. And there's so much going on in the world, but thank you for spotlighting this really important issue.
Indeed. I think it's terribly important for so many reasons that I won't even give. I'll try to remain a little neutral. Mike Brickner, Executive Director of the ACLU Delaware, thank you so much for taking the time today to speak.
Thank you, Sharon. Have a great day.